Good evening, everybody. I would just like to hit you with the Holy Scriptures before I get into detail to explain some information that I need to explain so my company, Alpha and Omega, gets omitted certain information so certain people are aware of public information that they need to be aware when they're either in a bind or they're having trouble or etc. So now if you go to Kings in the cipher, Holy Scriptures, this is page 714. Yahweh Elohim talks about Baal, and the fact is that these prophets are worshiping this person called Baal. And this has a significance because there's a internal conflict going on in that specific section, which I'm going to put on my Twitter as well. But I want to just bring this section up because in Zatar law, when Abraham designed Zatar law, when he designed it, it has the 16 principles. One of the important 16 principles is a thing called being meek, or using wisdom. This is the Hebrew translation. This is the translation of it. And then this is wisdom. It's page 57 in this book right here. So the reason why I'm bringing that up in this matter to begin with is you have a situation where people think that they can just avoid the inevitable. Now, what does that mean? You have, first of all, in this book right here, accounting for payroll, for Department of Labor, and etc. When you apply to become a CSCA worker, and you go into business with the CSCA, and let's just say, as an example, the Silver Service or the federal government or the state, they have to give you a pay scale structure, and they have to write everything down, especially when it comes to a trade union as well. A union representative is in their position. A union representative is in the position of protecting your rights. It is the same thing, which I'm going to show you here, when it comes to a mortgage. When you are a real estate agent and you go take the real estate exam in New York, you have to take a training. I took mine in place in Levittown, which I would recommend. I don't know if they're there anymore, but I took that, and I took a commercial class there as well that has to do with commercial real estate, which is it's the same field, but it's a different, it's not residential, it's commercial buildings. The reason why I'm bringing this up, this pay, to begin with, is because it has to do with the mortgage specifically. So a property, right here, property, right here. And you have to have proof. Okay, and this is something I also want to hit right here. Bingo. Promissory note. Promissory note. I'm going to highlight it and put it in my phone as well. Okay? It's an unconditional promise in writing made by one person to another person, signed by the maker, engaging to pay a specific sum of money to or to the order of a specific person or to the borrower. So, that promissory note, it's used in mortgages, and it's also used, besides mortgages, it's also used for student loans. So if you take let's just say you go to Columbia, or let's just say you go to a university, and you have to take a student loan out, for example. When you take that student loan out, you have to fill out forms. The problem is the universities and a lot of these federal governments are not telling you the whole matter, and that's something I'm going to bring up in this book I have to begin with, and that's you cannot put something on the computer. You have to verbally explain it. Now that does not mean you have to be watching a seminar. Somebody has to explain to you why are they charging that ridiculous amount of money to begin with. It's like as an employee, there's the employer, which is the entity, the business organization to begin with. They have to pay you a certain amount of money. Now, I was at a hospital, and I found out later that hospital was committing negligence, because they had been, or they're getting audited right now, and they're not allowed to steal people's information. You can't just steal someone's information to begin with. You're really not supposed to be doing that to begin with. It's very, very dangerous to begin with. You have to be very careful when it comes to that information that I'm explaining, because you could be like a hospital safety officer or a nurse, and you could be making $80 or $90 an hour. Some nurses and some people in the CSCA, they have unions, but the problem is with those unions is very, very, they do a lot of shady stuff, and I'm not saying this, but if it wasn't for the Nursing Association having certain cases, you have to have OSHA. They got to be OSHA compliant. The hospital's got to be OSHA compliant. It cannot fall against OSHA or Department of Labor in regards to health and safety and well-being. Because if you're having a patient, it's like an emergency medical technician. If they're bringing the person into the hospital, and let's just say the person, the technician is not following the policies and procedures and committing negligence, that emergency medical technician can get, number one, he could lose his license, he can get fired, and he can get sued. That happens in civil and criminal court. The reason why I'm bringing this up in this matter is it has to do a lot with this insurance business. You have a lot of, the reason why I'm bringing this up, I had to take this 300 multiple choice exam for the life and health insurance. And you have to take into account what the business entity is to begin with. And most of these business entities, they're corporations. The colleges are non-for-profit, which means they essentially have certain ways of getting paid. Colleges or universities get paid by state and federal aid. So if you apply for TAP or FAFSA, when you apply for FAFSA, you also have to apply for TAP, which is the Tuition Assistance Program, as well as the federal, which has to do with FAFSA. The reason why I'm bringing this up is this book right here, when I was in medical school, this book is very important. I would recommend reading it because it gives you some information. You have to understand that in New York State, when it comes to the medical breakdown, when you have insurance, you have Empire, you have Humana, you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you have the TRICARE insurance, military insurance, etc. When you take this exam, this life and health insurance exam, there are levels. There's grades. It's like a graded system, which I want to show you guys so you're at least aware. And I'll give you the specific section. This way, you guys have it. And if you ever need to reference this again, you can always come back to this video. And this is very helpful for a lot of people, because they really should start explaining this to a lot of people. So, okay, here we go. Try here. $426. This is something I want to bring up. This is TRICARE. This has to do with military insurance. So, a lot of people, if you're, in regards, I'm going to specifically talk about Medicaid and Medicare, which is this 426, 424, right here. Medicare, when you're working for a company, and if you don't make a certain amount of money, you can apply for Medicaid, but specifically you have to know what insurance you're going to get. Some CSCA jobs and some of the federal government jobs, they can give it to you. Sometimes certain jobs in the private sector, you're on your own and you have to get whatever health insurance to begin with. The reason why I'm bringing this up is you have, let me see, just bear with me for a second because I want to specifically talk about this with policies and procedures. Okay, I'll specifically talk about the grade sections for the gold and etc. I'll find it probably as I'm going through this. Okay. So, when I was at New York Life Insurance, and I interned for them, there are grades for like life and health insurance, for disability, for etc. As a broker, New York Life is a very good insurance company. I'd highly recommend them, and Prudential to begin with. They're good at, when you have a person that's an agent, that's they have a specific name for them. But what they do is they're essentially getting their goal of becoming a financial advisor or a financial planner for yourself. When you're at a job, because I was at Winthrop Hospital and etc., when you're at that job, you really should have health insurance, and you should either have an annuity or a life insurance policy. And you should have some sort of policy that has to deal with disability. So God forbid you get hurt on the job or etc., you're in a workers' comp case, you can start collecting your benefits to begin with. Because you can't rely on the workers' compensation because they're not going to give you enough money. This has to do with this book specifically. There is silver, there's gold, there's platinum, there's like 4 or 5 grades. Now these grades, no matter what, at the end of the day, the insurance has to cover most of the cost. There's 50-50, There's 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, 90-10. Those are the ratios. The highest one is platinum. Though probably the lowest one is silver, or there's one prior to that, which I can't think of off the top of my head. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because you have a lot of these insurance companies during this pandemic where they, as a person that was in the AmeriCorps, that was in the military, I was a patient advocate. I did an advocacy program. I specifically had training done at the AmeriCorps. I had a book like this. I wrote everything down. You gotta be an advocate for a patient when you're in the healthcare professional field. If you're not an advocate for that person, it's not going to look well on your career. So if you're a nurse, a doctor, whether you're part-time, full-time, or whatever position you have to take the HIPAA and the healthcare system very seriously. And you have to be unbiased. Because when I took these courses in the healthcare to begin with, it's all run on algorithms. If you don't have the correct algorithm, which means if you don't have the correct setup, if you don't have the greatest foundation for yourself, you're not going to be successful in life. You're just going to be another person, and you want to be an extraordinary individual. So, in regards to that matter, the reason why I'm bringing this up with this algorithm, it has to do with social media. Now, that's social media to begin with. The reason why I'm bringing that up is your rights go by the jurisdiction of the amendments. It does not go by penal code. It does not go by titles. It does not go by statute, ordinance, or etc. Those are color of law. As long as you did not commit bodily injury harm. See, some people, they get hurt or sick on the job. And some doctors are not really medically responsible, and they mess up. And this is why a lot of these psychiatrists, psychologists, physical therapists, doctors, lawyers, and people that are specifically, the biggest field now is holistic medicine or holistic treatment. You go to a chiropractor or massage or acupuncture specialist. You have to focus. The number one thing is your health. Your health is very important. If you do not have a good health, if you're not a healthy person, your career is going to be greatly affected. And we repeat that. Your career will be affected if your health is not being able to be doing certain things. Now, I met this guy, which I have this book I'm going to show you a little bit later. But I have this book which has to do with the history or the story behind why you can be in an economy, especially as bad as it being now, with Robert Kiyosaki. Sorry if I mispronounce it. Sorry, Robert. He's a good person here. You can set up a business and follow certain rules and ethics, but you need the right people around you. You could set up a corporation, an LLC, an LLP. If you want to open up a law firm or etc., you can do it because it can be done. You just have to follow certain things. You cannot operate without a license. A lot of these doctors and lawyers, they don't operate with a license. I've been in when I was with my boss, and I'm going to be honest with you, I've seen a lot of people, they set up the entities, they go to injury court, or they have the workers' comp, or they have the property, and they have no collateral for when someone gets hurt or someone falls. There have been a lot of cases in malls or shopping centers where people fall and they get hurt. They don't have signs or anything. That's an OSHA violation. That's also, with OSHA, you also have to deal with the EPA, which is with the Environmental Protection Agency, which has to do with your air rights. You go into some of these buildings, they have to have filters and everything, etc. When the coronavirus happened, I was given orders to help some of these State University of New York, City University of New York organizations that have to do with your rights, because they were impeding on your rights. You cannot expect a judge, and a lot of these judges, you got to give them a lot of credit. They did not want any kid getting affected. And they were the ones that were at the front lines that were stating, hey, you can't have these kids in the buildings if they're not up to code. And a lot of those buildings, they were not up to code. There's a person that's buildings and grounds. If you look it up on Google, it'll explain the position. They did not pass. I went into, they had me or Harold do tests from a distance. He went into a video. He had a video, and he saw a big, huge amount of mold, lint, etc. in the filtration system, and they're not supposed to have any of that. That's supposed to be clear. The state or federal is supposed to go in there and supposed to check all those vents and see they're up to code. If they're not doing that, they can get audited. The hospital can lose their license. They can be locked. Those hospitals should have been locked up to begin with, because you can't have a hospital have no proper circulation. A lot of the city universities did not pass this audit that they had. They had done not a tuition audit, but they done an audit on basically the building being up to code, and it wasn't up to code. They failed. They had an adverse opinion on their information, and the internal controls was they couldn't open the building up, and you cannot go against OSHA and their regulations and rules, because they're ultimately protecting your rights. It's the same thing with Department of Health. Department of Health's rights you have to be careful with going to work, and if it's not, sometimes it's better not to go into a job where it's not safe. And it's better to be a whistleblower than to go into a job where you're ultimately going to have to deal with problems. Some jobs you shouldn't even go to, because they don't even pass. There was a lot of a perfect example. Harold, basically, he was doing. We were in the police and the bureaus, and they had mold and etc. in these precincts. You're not allowed to have any of that stuff. They took a video and showed me everything from a distance. I was here in a distance, showed me everything, and it didn't pass. So you can't have that. That doesn't pass. I had to take OSHA classes because I was training and operated in certain fields. But you can't mess around with that stuff, because that has to do with the state. State is very serious when it comes to licensing. I was prior to being in the construction, I did certain construction things. Prior to that, I did security And one of the security things I had to deal with is I had done an investigation on was I had a background. I studied the certification for private investigation. I had to get licensed and operated by a police officer and take a class, take a 20 or 30 multiple choice exam and pass. Now, when I did all of this stuff, you have to keep records, and luckily I kept records of everything. But when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to the law and algorithms and etc., you can't, you want to be in good standings with the job or etc., they have to pass certain codes. Now, a lot of these state or federal organizations, they should really get audited. You shouldn't have if you're a bank and you have multiple promissory notes that didn't pass, you shouldn't be in business anymore. You should be shut down. And if you're if you're an investor to begin with, you should have that investigated, because that's your funds, that's your bread money. You're going to have problems, because then they're going to be lawyers like me that'll go into court and you'll just get laughed at. That's what happened with Google. That's why censorship is very big. You cannot censor the FCC or the FTC. If they say to you, you have to send the documents to them or send video records, you got to do that. You're in violation of the law. And that goes against your constitutional rights. That goes against that government or that entity to begin with. Because you can't have a government entity like them. You are not bullying those organizations. They are very scary. You need them to begin with. The FCC, FTC protect your internet and TV and phone and your internet rights, your all your human rights. That organization has done an excellent job to help lawyers and accountants and advisors go after a lot of bad people. And yet again, you guys, YouTube and Twitter, TikTok, invasion of privacy. You impede on criminal investigation, and you commit federal charges. You're gonna go back to federal court, and they're gonna laugh at you, because they'll probably have me or one of my relatives get involved, and you're not gonna win this fight. You're gonna lose. Ultimately, you will lose, because you got to be licensed and operate, and you guys haven't been passing any tests. You've been failing. You can't censor people, bully or harass, or do anything. You can't even send the bureau agents to somebody's house. You're not allowed to do that. It's unconstitutional. And if a judge hears about that after 4 or 5 times, I don't care how conservative you have to be. That judge is gonna tear you a new lawsuit into the next jurisdiction, and you won't have a license. You will not pass the accounting or auditing reports. You will fail. You will get an F, like in college. So thank you guys. I'd just like to give you some information. You have a pleasant day and have a good night. Thank you.